Now, welcome to part 2 of my story about what happens if Ahsoka Tano never leaves the Jedi Order and instead is at the Battle of Ringo Varda, where she and Fives perhaps begin to unravel the true or final purpose of the clones, which is, of course, to carry out Order 66 and kill the Jedi. And very quickly before getting back to it, if you have not seen part 1 yet, I'd highly recommend checking it out first, or this part likely won't make much sense to you. I'll include a link to it in the description and comments below. And if you end up enjoying it, you can just come on back for this part. And every subsequent Tuesday or so, this one is going up on a Wednesday, of course, a new part of the story should be up until it's done. Anyway, without further ado, let's get back to the story. We pick up the story with Ahsoka standing alone and just beyond a shimmering red energy field that keeps Barriss Offee locked in a small prison cell, in which she now sits cross-legged in the center of, her eyes calm and focused on Ahsoka standing before her. Ahsoka stares back at her, not quite matching her calm, but trying to nonetheless, as she says, "Why, Barriss? I thought we were friends." To that, Barriss gives Ahsoka a faint, almost mocking smile and replies, "Friends? The Jedi have no friends. Theirs is meant to be a life of absolute dedication and servitude to the greater good, a life free of the burden of attachments that can lead to obsession and then to the dark side." To that, Ahsoka simply says back, "There is a difference between friendship and attachment, compassion and compulsion." The mocking grin on Barriss's face only grows. "Is that what your master taught you?" With defiant pride, Ahsoka simply replies, "It is." Barriss then gracefully gets to her feet and says rather thoughtfully, "How quickly one can lead to the other, though, if a Jedi is not mindful. How quickly, too, can following the light become being blinded by it." Ahsoka then takes a few frustrated steps forward, stopping just outside the energy field, and says, "What happened to you, Barriss? Why did you lose your faith in the Jedi? Why did you say those things at my trial about them fighting for the dark side? You can't honestly believe that." Barriss offers almost a sympathetic smile and says, "You wouldn't be here now if some part of you didn't believe it too, didn't feel it." "Feel what?" Ahsoka asks. "The fear at the heart of the Jedi Order," Barriss answers. "The fear that is pulling it apart from within, rotting it at its very core. The more the Jedi try and deny it, the more they believe themselves to be in the right regarding this war, the more it grows and the more they're consumed by the dark side, while arrogantly believing it is the light that they fight for." Ahsoka shakes her head but doesn't seem to know how to argue against that. Barriss then says, "Look at how quickly the Jedi turned on you. Look how quickly they lost faith in you." Ahsoka seems to think on that a moment, but then a flash of anger crosses her face as she says, "Only because you framed me? Why, Barriss? Why do that to me? You claim you did it all to make a point, but if it wasn't for Anakin, you would have gotten away with it. No one would have ever known it was you and what you wanted to say against the Jedi." Barriss then turns away from Ahsoka and is quiet for a long moment before finally saying, "The idea wasn't mine." "Then whose was it?" Ahsoka demands. "You can't possibly imagine how big this is," Barriss responds. "I tried to do my part, to prove myself, to earn my place in the future that is to come." With only her eyes, Barriss then glances up in the corner of the cell where there is some type of monitoring device or camera. She makes an ever so subtle gesture of the head towards it, and then turns and walks up to the energy field and says in a whisper, which draws Ahsoka ever closer, "And now I have a chance to prove myself again. A last chance." The lights in the room then flicker as if there's some sort of power surge, which momentarily distracts Ahsoka and she glances around. That's when the energy field falls, and the very instant it does, Barriss reaches out for Ahsoka's lightsabers that are hanging at her side. She manages to get her hand on one and instantly ignites it and swings, but Ahsoka manages to retrieve the other and blocks her attack at the last moment. "It doesn't have to be like this," Ahsoka pleads. "Tell me what's going on and we can work together to stop it." But to that, Barriss responds, "Don't you understand yet? It's already too late to stop it. The Jedi didn't think twice about what I said, about the warning I gave them. They deserve what happens next." Augmented by the Force, Ahsoka then pushes Barriss back into the cell and frantically glances around for some sort of perhaps panel that can raise the energy shield again, but she can't locate one. That's when Barriss leaps forward and unleashes a flurry of swings that Ahsoka manages to block, and it's quite clear that all Ahsoka is doing is defending herself. Any counterattack she offers is weak and only in an effort to disarm or disable Barriss, not to truly hurt her, while it's clear by the aggressive way Barriss is attacking that she's aiming for the kill. Their duel lasts only 20 to 30 seconds or so before the door to the room opens and in begins to pour shock troopers, roughly a half dozen in total. Ahsoka then again uses the Force and pushes Barriss, and creates some separation between the two. Barriss tries to make a desperate last lunge at her, but as she does, using stun, the shock troopers open fire, and at least one of the rings of stunning energy hits Barriss, and her last attack falls short, and she crumbles to the ground. Ahsoka quickly deactivates the one saber she was using, and at the same time pulls to her the one that Barriss had taken. Ahsoka then rushes to Barriss' side, seeing that she is fighting with all she has to stay conscious long enough to apparently say something, but it's only coming out as the faintest of whispers. Ahsoka then puts her ear as close to Barriss' mouth as she can, and listens as she utters one word before passing out, and that word causes Ahsoka's eyes to go wide with surprise, and perhaps some confusion. But she ever so quickly wipes that look away as one of the shock troopers approaches her and says, "Sorry, Commander, there was some type of power surge across the whole cell block. Not sure what caused it yet, but we'll take care of everything from here." Ahsoka then gets to her feet and seems a bit leery about the excuse given to her by the shock trooper, but doesn't say anything to him about it. Instead, with a great deal of purpose in her steps, she quickly exits the room. Which is when we're then taken to the planet Kamino and into one of the white, sterile-looking hallways of the cloning facility where we see Fives, Shaak Ti, and the Kaminoan doctor, Nala Se, walking slowly. We seem to jump into the middle of a conversation where Nala Se says, "This is a highly unusual request. To go through so much trouble to diagnose one trooper seems like an unproductive use of time and resources. The defective clone should simply be decommissioned and replaced." We see Five's hands then ball up into fists, and it looks like he wants to say something, but Shaak Ti, who sees the look on his face, then says first, "All the Jedi Generals value the lives of each of the men who serves under them, and not just as soldiers of the Republic, but as living beings. And from what I understand, General Skywalker more so than most." "Curious," the doctor responds. "I had always been led to believe the Jedi forsake any and all attachments, that they always separate their feelings from the decisions they make. This trait, I would assume, would make them excellent generals, that they would always put the objective before anything and everything else." Shaak Ti, though, quickly counters. "One could argue that a general who does not value his troops is not a general that those under his command would find worth fighting for. In fact, the more a general values his troops, the more they'll likely be to fight for them, and hence achieve an objective." The Kaminoan doctor, Nala Se, seems to think on that a moment and then responds, "Perhaps in normal circumstances, but the clones are bred to follow any and all orders without question. Taking their feelings into account is unnecessary. As is, I believe, going through so much trouble for just one of them. That is why I have delegated this issue to Dr. Se-Urch. I have other, more pressing matters to attend to." Without another word then, Nala Se simply turns and walks down a different hallway. Fives and Shaak Ti then stop and look at each other for a moment before she says, "Unfortunately, I too have other matters to attend to." Fives quickly says, "Understandable, General." Shaak Ti is about to then walk away herself, but says, "I do find it a bit curious that General Skywalker sent an ARC trooper to be Tup's chaperone here. I would think your expertise would be better served elsewhere." "Well, I witnessed the incident with Tup," Fives then says. "General Skywalker thought it might be useful somehow." Shaak Ti considers that for a moment, then says, "General Skywalker's report was rather vague. It only said Tup sustained a head injury during the battle at Ringo Varda, and as much as I do not wish to agree with Nala Se on this one, it does seem odd to go through so much trouble for one clone head injury." Fives gives a bit of a shrug. "As you yourself said, General Skywalker cares for his men more than most. Plus, when Tup came to, he was acting irrationally, you might say." Shaak Ti then looks curious while Fives increasingly looks uncomfortable and like he regrets his choice of words. But instead of inquiring further, Shaak Ti just nods and tells Fives she won't keep him any longer and to keep her informed on the situation. Fives then walks away while Shaak Ti watches him for a long, long moment, clearly thinking the whole thing over. We then move forward and see Fives walk into a small medical room somewhere else in the facility, where within it, and laying on an examination table, is an unconscious Tup. while standing over him is yet another long-necked Kaminoan, who looks up and seems surprised at the intrusion. Fives, looking a bit awkward, then says, apologies for the interruption, Dr. Sayurch, is it? I only wanted to check on Tup to see if you've found anything. The Kaminoan regards him with a cold look for a long moment before saying, most of your kind call me Dr. Search, and since I've grown fond of the name, feel free to do the same. As for your friend here, I've scanned him and found nothing. He's in perfect health. Fives quickly shakes his head. No, that can't be. Our medical droid... But Dr. Search cuts him off and says, your medical droid was wrong. I am not. This clone is fine, and my time has been wasted. Fives again shakes his head. Are you sure? Is there perhaps another test or something you could do? Dr. Search looks somewhat offended. Am I sure? Why, of course I'm sure. This entire project was originally mine. I was the one Jedi Sifo-Dyas originally came to. I was the one who designed this facility and worked on the first iteration of your kind. Perfected what you are today, even. I was in charge of all of this, until Prime Minister Lama Su saw fit to take it away from me, to take credit for all I'd done. Dr. Search then pushes back his wave of anger, and then cocks his head a bit, stares at Fives for a moment, and then continues. How curious. I have just told you that your fellow clone is fine, yet you continue to show elevated levels of stress. Tell me, what is the real reason you brought him here? Fives pretends to be confused and mutters, real reason? Yes, Dr. Search responds. He then glances down at Tup and continues, this clone hasn't suffered any sort of head trauma. You suspect something else is wrong with him, don't you? Something you're reluctant to talk about. Fives shakes his head again and tries to play innocent. I'm just following the orders of General Skywalker. Dr. Search then gives a bit of a smile and says, yes, following orders is, after all, what I designed you to do. In fact, comply with Order 101. Instantly then, Fives stands at perfect attention, back locked, legs and arms straight, chin up and face blank and completely expressionless. Dr. Search then says, now, clone, tell me why you're really here. Without hesitation and in a droid-like voice, Fives says, Clone Trooper 5385 experienced a malfunction on the battlefield and attempted to assassinate Jedi Commander Ahsoka Tano. How fascinating, Dr. Search replies, as if truly intrigued. Do go on. Fives then says, Clone Trooper 5385 then insinuated he had orders to kill the Jedi, which is when Jedi Commander Ahsoka Tano devised a plan to bring the malfunctioning Clone Trooper here in order to determine the cause of said malfunction. Looking even more intrigued, Dr. Search then punches some commands into a nearby control panel. A moment later then, a small floating droid comes forward and hovers just above Tup's head. Dr. Search then says to it, perform a deep brain scan, but the droid protests, saying how it exposes the clone to unnecessary radiation when he has otherwise been deemed healthy and thus would not require such a scan. With a sigh, Dr. Search then punches a few more commands into the control panel, which then causes the droid to immediately emit a blue beam that washes over and scans Tup's head. A moment later, an image comes up on the panel in front of Dr. Search, where we see some sort of strange growth within Tup's head. How unusual, the doctor says to himself. A tumor has formed around the inhibitor chip, likely causing it to malfunction, thus causing the clone to turn on the Jedi and forego its primary function, unless... Dr. Search shakes his head, as if refusing to believe what he now suspects. He begins to punch another command into the panel as he mumbles something to himself about, is this why I was removed from Project Lead? Because you knew I would never go along with something like this. As soon as he's done punching in the command, the medical droid unveils a small drill-like device and begins to descend towards Tup's head. Fives, who still stands there at perfect attention as if not in control of himself, still flinches ever so slightly as he's all but forced to watch the droid drill into his friend's head, as if a part of him desperately wants to break free. In no time, though, the droid removes a small chip and places it on a medical tray and presents it to Dr. Search, who then picks it up, holds it gently between two fingers, and examines it close to his face. And he then says, time to find out what's really going on here. We then find ourselves out in space and see a dreary red planet we recognize to be Dathomir. A moment later, we watch as Ahsoka's Jedi starfighter comes out of hyperspace above it and are taken into the cockpit, where we hear her astromech droid make some beeps that seem less than pleased. Ahsoka then responds, "I don't know exactly what we're doing here either, R7, but this is the place Barriss mentioned." R7 then makes a few more beeps, but Ahsoka shakes her head and says, "I don't think that's going to be necessary. I feel something down there." We then see her fighter detach from its hyperspace ring and head down towards the planet. Soon enough, it lands on the surface of Dathomir, and we then watch as a hesitant Ahsoka, both sabers in hand but not ignited, explores the surface, finding the remains of a battle, and probably a fairly recent one. Finally, she comes across a body that seemed to be drawing her in, and it is that of the Night Sister Witch Mother Talzin. As Ahsoka studies it, a noise startles her, and she looks up to see a figure emerge from the nearby shadows, and it is none other than Maul, who says to her, "Why are you here?" Ahsoka quickly ignites her sabers, holds them defensively, and says, "I was sent here by Barriss Offee." Maul seems to think for a moment, then it comes to him and he says, "Ah yes, I remember. The young Jedi Padawan my brother and I encountered on Dracus Prime. So eager to learn that one was. A great apprentice she would have made, if not for my brother." Ahsoka's eyes dart to and fro all around her as she says, "And where is your brother now?" "Killed by my former master," Maul says to her. Then he seems to talk to himself as he says, Yes, everything. He has taken everything from me. But I shall have my revenge. Yes, I shall have my revenge." Ahsoka then says loudly to recapture his attention, "What lies did you tell my friend Barriss? How did you turn her? Why did you want her to frame me?" "Lies," Maul responds. No lies. Only the truth you Jedi failed to see, and she was eager to listen, to learn. We offered her a place with us, but she refused. She wanted to confront him, to see if he was truly the one behind it all. I told her it would only lead to her death, but she wouldn't listen." Maul's face twists into a fierce, angry scowl as he then says, "But now I suspect she wanted to learn from him. How could I not see that I was simply sending him another pawn to be used?" Ahsoka then interrupts and says, "Sending who another pawn to be used?" Maul quickly shakes his head. No, I won't make that same mistake twice." We then see on Maul's face that his mind is racing, and finally he says, "But perhaps we can help each other. Perhaps together we can stop him." Ahsoka gives him a look as if to say he's crazy for even thinking that, which angers Maul, who says back, "Your Jedi Order is doomed, as is the Republic. You just don't see it yet." Ahsoka responds, "Why should I believe anything you have to say?" Maul says back, "You shouldn't, but you should believe in the Force. You should believe it has sent you here for a reason, that everything in your life has led to this moment, and it is up to you to figure out why." These words clearly cause Ahsoka to pause and think, at which point a faint smile comes to Maul's face. He then closes his eyes and says, "I feel it, your doubt and confusion. You don't want to believe it. You don't want to believe that the Jedi Order has already failed and fallen, but you do. You know it to be true." Maul opens his eyes and takes a few steps forward. As he reaches out his hand towards Ahsoka, he says, "We are the last hope for the galaxy, the only ones who can now stop him. Take my hand, join me, learn from me, and together we can save everything you care about." And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this part, and what you think might happen next. Either way, do leave a comment below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.